For Spanish speakers, pronunciation is one of the hardest parts of learning English. The problem begins in the early stages of the learning process. Too many students start learning English the wrong way by only studying grammar and reading without paying attention to listening and speaking. By the time they finish school, they have lost the ability to reproduce the sounds of the English language correctly. So how can you correct this problem? By doing the following. 1. Pay attention and practice pronouncing the difficult sounds. If you don't know what you're doing wrong, how are you going to correct it? You must pay attention to all the sounds that mess up your pronunciation. Please do not think you're not affected by it. I even make these mistakes if I don't pay close enough attention. Here is a list of some of the sounds that are difficult for Spanish speakers to pronounce. Try saying them aloud many times. S at the beginning of a word. Examples: school, Spain, Spanish, special. Do not pronounce in Spanish E before the S. It's not a school, it's school. Z or Z is, was, does, flowers. If I didn't mention this sound, you'd be totally unaware of its existence because it doesn't exist in Spanish. It is the buzz sound made by bees. Something like this. Bzz. Bzz. Although it's not as important as other sounds, if you start making this sound, your English will sound much better. V. Examples: very, vest, van, various. The sound is not B, but rather V. To make this sound, you must bite your lower lip.
Able.
Able, as in vegetable, available, reasonable, comfortable. The sound is not able as in table, but something more similar to able, where the L goes at the end. ED. Examples: loved, played, worked, wanted. The E or A that comes before the D is not pronounced. If you omit this sound, you get three kinds of sounds. D as in loved, ID as in wanted, and T as in worked.
Us.
O-U-S. Examples: nervous, various, serious, malicious. To learn this sound, first say for us, then nervous, various, serious, malicious.
E.
Y. Examples: yes, young, yesterday, young. This sound is not the Spanish Y, it's like the Spanish E. So you should say yes, young, yesterday, young. I. La I o I. Examples: is, it, his, sit. I would say this sound is in between a Spanish I and a Spanish E. Remember that it is not the Spanish I. So it's his, something like that. H. Examples: how, house, here, or hair. This sound is not the Spanish J. It is instead a very soft sound that you make when you read on your glasses and wipe them clean. So it's very soft, house. Sh, show, she, shop, shape. Many Spanish speakers pronounce this sound as CH because this sound doesn't exist in Spanish. The most similar sound is ch. However, this sound is much longer and softer, as when you're trying to make someone shut up and you say shh, shh. Compare chop, cortar en rebanadas, and shop, tienda. Woo. Woo. Examples: wood or wood, de madera. This sound is not a Spanish gu. It's much softer, and to do it right, you should try to put the lips as if you were going to give someone a kiss. Wood. Examples: sun, money, sun, and none. I call this sound la del tonto. In English, is pronounced like oh. It doesn't exist in Spanish, and its phonemic symbol is this little roof. Is the oh pronounced when your mouth is a bit more open, but not as much as when you say the Spanish ah. Oh, that's the difference. Like in difficult, around, or present. This is the schwa sound, the famous schwa sound. Its phonemic symbol is like an inverted I. Actually, it's very similar to the del tonto. As it is the most common English sound, we'll talk more about it later, okay? A and E together, as in man, rat, sat, or pant. As this sound doesn't exist in Spanish, the Spanish speaker pronounces it like a Spanish A. In reality, it's a sound between the A and the Spanish E. M. Examples: some, thumb, mum, tom. As in Spanish, there are no words that end in an M except for the name Miriam, I think. The M at the end of the words is normally pronounced as an N. To pronounce it, try to close your lips at the end of the word. Pay attention and practice connected speech. When we speak, we tend to link one word to the other. This is particularly true with certain structures. For example, when it goes after a verb, we always link the two words together. Examples. Do it sounds something like do it. The sound do links to it. Get it. The sound get links to it. Read it sounds read it. The sound read links to it. Connected speech also occurs when a word ends in a consonant sound and the following word also starts with the same or a similar consonant sound. In this case, we pronounce only one consonant, trying to lengthen the sound. For example, good day. This time, I get tired. Learn to speak with the right sounds and intonation. You are never going to improve your accent if you continue to speak as if English as if it were Spanish. Apart from trying to correct the mistakes I've just mentioned, you should try to completely change your way of speaking. Normally, when you succeed in doing this, your mouth will hurt. This pain is an indication that you're using some muscles in your mouth that you never used before. So it's good news. Now, here are some examples of what you can do in order to speak with the right sounds and intonation. 1. Emphasize consonants. In Spanish, every consonant goes with a vowel. In English, this is not always true. There are many words where vowels simply disappear. Examples. Words ending in ed, such as regular verbs. Loved is not loved, but loved. Worked is not worked, but worked. When I say emphasize consonants, I mean trying to stress their sound. Let's hear some examples. Dog. D and G are important. O isn't. Because. Notice the final E is not pronounced before. Again, that final E is not pronounced. Sit. S and T are very important. The I instead is very short. To pay attention to schwa sounds. Most of you have never heard of the schwa sound. The paradox is that the schwa sound is the most common sound in the English language. This sound appears when many vowels are together in an unstressed word or syllable in a phrase. It is a very relaxed and short sound. The phonemic symbol for the schwa is like an inverted E. But let's first try to get some basic concepts clear, okay? Now, what are stressed words? When we want to emphasize certain words in a phrase, we stress them. This means that we pronounce these words more carefully, saying their sound in a very distinctive way. These stressed words are normally nouns, main verbs, adjectives, or adverbs. Now, what are unstressed words? These are words that don't have too much importance in a phrase, so we pronounce them faster and in a more relaxed way. Unstressed words are normally auxiliary verbs, pronouns, articles, linkers, and prepositions. Now let's see an example of a sentence pronounced trying not to use schwa sound. This present is for my sister. As you heard, I tried to pronounce every single syllable, stressing the vowels. As a result, the sentence sounded very slow and unnatural. Now let's hear now the same sentence pronounced with schwa. This present's for my sister. So, this is the way people normally speak. As you can hear, the words are said so fast, the sound vowels almost disappear. That reduced sound of the vowels is the schwa. It is very clear in the word for. We don't normally say for, we say per. Now, what should you do with the schwa sound? Schwa usage varies greatly between dialects. In fact, Australians pronounce schwas in places where British and Americans won't. So my advice is that you just try to be aware of its existence when you listen to English. What does this mean in practice? It means that you should know that when native speakers speak English, they very often don't pronounce the vowels very clearly. As you become more used to the schwa sound, you can start trying to imitate it. Remember every now and then to look for the phonemic symbol, the inverted E, in syllables and phrases. Please check the course material for a link to a site that will help you check the phonetics of phrases. Now, another advice, try to speak with a softer tone. Some Spanish accents, especially from Castilla and the north of Spain, are very strong. They might occasionally sound like Arabic or Greek with a rolling R and a strong stress. Especially in these cases, you will need to speak with a much softer tone in order to get the right sounds and intonation in English. For example, what's your name? Sounds something like, what's your name? What's your name? All the sounds are soft and the Y of your is pronounced like in Spanish E. So, if I pronounce this question with a strong Spanish accent instead, I'll say, what's your name? As you can hear, all the words sound much harder. Now, another advice, for or the. Try to give to English the intonation a native English speaker gives to Spanish. This tip sounds like a joke, but I promise it will work if you start doing it, of course. Let's see what I mean. A native English speaker pronounces yo soy Pedro, something like yo soy Pedro. The sounds of some consonants are explosive. If you think about it, you'll see that to have the right intonation in English, you need to do exactly the same. Emphasize the consonants, which are in many cases explosive. When I say explosive, I mean that you have to release air through the mouth, which is something you never do in Spanish. Now let's see some examples. Example, put. You see the air? Put. Tea. Talk. Sit. Now, what accent should you try to imitate? I always say that you should try to imitate the accent you feel the most comfortable with. British, Irish, American, Australian, or any other dialect. If you have been living in any English-speaking country, you'll have a tendency to imitate the accent of the country you have lived in. That's perfectly okay. Take into account that in this course, the audiobook, The Picture of Dorian Gray, is read with a British English. But many of the links to recordings that we have included here are in American or Australian accents. There is a mixture of accents that I consider beneficial because if you live in Europe, you'll have to get used to many different ways of speaking. If you live in Latin America, you'll hear American English most of the time. However, it's not a bad idea to learn the differences between the different accents because you'll improve your listening skills. I personally speak with a particular accent which tends to sound more like American English, but I call it European accent. It's actually a combination of several accents. Remember that the important thing is not that you speak like a native, which is normally only possible to do if you start learning English at a very young age. The important thing here is that you reduce your Spanish accent when you speak English. If your Spanish accent is less strong, you will feel better as native speakers will understand you better. Another important result of improving your accent will be that people will immediately think that you speak better English than you actually do. And this in turn will motivate you to continue learning. That's why it is so important for you to improve your accent. Let's see some exercises to improve your pronunciation. Now, remembering all the rules I have mentioned above can be quite challenging. All the rules I've mentioned before. In fact, most people forget them immediately and continue to speak English with the Spanish sounds. Is there an easier way to improve your pronunciation? Of course there is. This is the way all the native English speakers used when they started to learn their language, listening and speaking in English the whole day. But how will we do it? We will listen and repeat the sentences of our audiobook. I will now show you how. We will use chapter 1 as an example. The idea is that you try to memorize these sentences by repeating them aloud as many times as necessary. In this process, you should use the phonetic alphabet and the approximate pronunciation, which I have included in the course material as a tool to help you. I encourage you to start practicing right now.